Welcome to Sit and Stay, the podcast that breaks down the challenges of starting and maintaining a mental health practice into digestible chapters. Sit and Stay is presented by RipsyTech, an electronic health record company committed to addressing the mental health crisis in the United States.
Welcome back to the Sit and Stay podcast, brought to you by RipsyTech. I am one of your hosts, RipsyTech Product Manager Parker Anderson. As always, I'm joined by RipsyTech founder and CEO, Tom Tarshis. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Parker. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Very busy time over in the Anderson household with a child on the way, but well, nonetheless. How are you?
Good. And you think it's busy now? Just
Right.
Wait, young man.
That is what I have been told. I've been told to expect less sleep, and I believe I understand just how rough that's going to be, but I don't think I will fully grasp just how rough it is until I'm experiencing it in the moment. So, something to look forward to, but it'll all be worth it, though.
It will, and in fact, just continuing on the tangent for a moment, you're in the envious position of potentially your happiest moment in life coming up, which is that when you hold your very first baby for the first time. And you're a great, kind person. There's lots of people in your family and friend group and people you love, but there is something about, holding that first baby for the first time that is a unique experience, and many people report it as their, that's what you're going to remember on your deathbed, maybe, or it's just this, Anyway, so it's a cool thing, and I'm excited for that to happen for you and for Aaliyah.
Thank you. A friend of mine, very good friend of mine, his first daughter was just born on Saturday, and I hadn't really heard from him all week, aside from the picture that he sent us on Saturday. And he texted me today, to send me the Nintendo Switch 2 announcement trailer, which is very exciting for people like me. But also, after that, I asked him, how's fatherhood going? He sent me a picture of, him holding his baby, and he said it's the best. And, looking at the picture, it's certainly, my first thought was, man, that looks like the best. And then he said,
Awesome.
I wish it was all moments like this, because right after this, there was poop and pee everywhere. But, things to look forward to.
Very good. Very good.
So just to pivot to the episode. So this week we're covering something quite topical, something that's been going on for the past week over in the LA area. There have been a number of there are two prominent wildfires going on. At least I know there are more, but from what we've read so far, and I pulled these facts and figures yesterday. So far, 20 people have died. Over 82,000 people have evacuated from their homes. Could potentially rise by 90,400 more people who are currently being warned that they might have to evacuate. And nearly 6,000 structures, I believe, have been destroyed completely. And now, thousands of people are in evacuation centers, coping with the immediate and emotional fallout of these events. And in today's episode, we thought it would be an opportune time to discuss, large-scale tragedies like these, how they can lead to a number of mental health challenges, including potentially PTSD. So, Tom, let's talk about this and the concept of support, community resilience, and let's get into it. Any kind of initial thoughts just from what I've said so far?
Yeah, no, and I think in our newsworthy heavily media focused lives that we lead, historically, if there was a natural disaster, at one point you would read about it in the newspaper the next day, and then there was television, right, updates and live news. But now it's sort of, instant, massive amounts of material about these tragedies from all over the world. And, natural disasters can take lots of forms, right, from fires to earthquakes. And then there's this other category of, like firework explosions gone wrong or mass shootings. And so there are a lot of these disaster and traumatic events that could all be, triggers for future mental health issues. And the world is now, inundated and quickly knows about them. And, the Los Angeles fires have probably been the top news story all over the world for the last week or so. And I think it, hits home for us as one of our RipsyTech employees lives in sort of a evacuation zone, and other family and friends who've been evacuated. So it's a timely topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to graduate school in the San Fernando Valley at Cal State Northridge, go Matadors, and made a number of friends who all live in the LA area. So it's been a lot of checking in on those people, checking in my grad school advisor. My brother lives in San Pedro, so he's a little further away from things, but just been a lot of checking in on people. Even my stepbrother, actually, he is actually over at Harvard, but he was working on a project in Altadena the day that the fire kind of took off. So he actually had to make an evacuation and find a place to stay. And yeah, it's as a native Californian, yeah, it certainly hits home. And it's so strange to be living on the other side of the country, where the issue that we're struggling with is snow, which is like a kind of a weird juxtaposition. It's the size of our country and the different types of issues that we all struggle with based on where we live. So with that being said, a big factor here that we're kind of thinking about is, this is a traumatic event, and it's a tragedy, and individuals, many, thousands of people are going to be affected by this, both directly or indirectly. And, in my case, knowing people who live there. So, what are some early, what are things that we should be looking out for in terms of, warning signs of kind of, negative impact of trauma on one's mental health?
Yeah. And, it's, as I'm very kind of evidence-based and research focused person. And the one positive about the LA fires is that there hasn't been a huge loss of life. There has been a significant loss of life, but we're not in hundreds or thousands of people are not going to die from this disaster. That being said, there are lots of, having your home burned down, knowing the people who have died from this, having your livelihood and other pieces threatened. It's all trauma. A lot of the research from disasters, similar to other things in mental health, it's very hard to get solid research on, how many people involved in a disaster will develop PTSD, how many people will be depressed, how long will symptoms last? Because the reality is there's no way you could have a full randomized control trial in place and okay, let's wait for the next disaster. Okay, study team.
Right.
So we have this kind of retrospective data on this event happened? How was follow-up on services people were able to get? And from a sort of logic perspective, after these traumatic events where people are killed, and if you think specifically about school shootings or natural disaster, and of course, a lot of the stuff I review is more child-based, but there tends to be immediate sort of counselors available for discussion and mental health professionals on site. But there is this phenomenon that for the fires, if you lose your house, or you don't have clothes for your kid, or the school burns down, or you don't know where your next meal is, a lot of those survival pieces are the things that need to be addressed and taken care of first, before you can really take a look at what's going on mental health wise. So it just, you're not going to be able to have a great conversation with a parent or a teen about, how they're doing when they're worried about where they're going to sleep that night. I mean, you can have conversations about those kind of direct issues and how to lend support. But, in general, making sure basic necessities and evacuation centers and things have been set up is a key piece. And then what we do know from some of the research, though, is that people who've gotten any kind of support or conversation at any time after a natural disaster do tend to do a little bit better with respect to follow-up, months or years later about mental health symptoms. So, that from a basic level, having some sort of support and mental health services in place and someone having a conversation does seem to be protective. With respect to sort of how many people will actually develop like PTSD or depression or have long-lasting symptoms, it's very variable. It seems like it's somewhere, between 15 to 50%, depending on the natural disaster, at 2 to 4 years follow up. There's some studies with 6 year or more year follow up where the number seems to be maybe more about 5 to 10% of people still with lingering symptoms. There's research to support that, the predecessor diagnosis to PTSD is acute stress disorder. So, right, you need to have a certain period of time before it goes to PTSD to pass. And there's data showing that people who meet criteria for acute stress disorder are more likely to have PTSD in the future. And so for the question of, what are the early warning signs of trauma, you're going to look for difficulty sleeping, nightmares, a lot of specific phobias develop. For example, kids who maybe had to evacuate in a fire may get a very big phobia or fear of flames or fire or anything associated with, what they experienced in the moment. So whether or not and there's some studies that seem to show in kids, these specific phobias and concerns about and higher rates of depression, may be more prevalent than the actual sort of PTSD diagnosis. But I threw a lot of information at you. I'll pause there for.
You mentioned, people who receive support afterwards, or mental health services, or conversation afterwards tend to do better. I guess. I was kind of wondering. How would that support be defined? I guess, is it just mental health services, or just, receiving support from people they care about, a little bit of both? I guess, how would you define that?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think in this specific research area, it was people who had a visit with a natural disaster counselor or mental health professional. Gotcha. That was the predictor. But right, the mind goes to all these other study possibilities where, hey, yeah, if you were in an area where there was great and immediate evacuation services and replacement clothes, and you got all this support about the necessities, is that a better predictor of doing well versus being able to sit with a trauma trained counselor for 45 minutes? Logically, it feels like having both available would be great. And as we know just from the therapy process, probably even sitting down and having someone listen to you empathically and hear your story and not jump into, we're going to fix everything right away, which is not possible, but just having that support is probably helpful. But
so I've heard a little bit about in some of the evacuation centers, this like kind of concept of like a mental health first aid, for helping people who are, maybe struggling with the acute aftermath of, this traumatic event. So I'm wondering if you kind of know anything a little bit about that, or any kind of strategies or therapeutic approaches that help people process and recover from these events, especially, in the acute aftermath.
Yeah. And, Parker, there's this concept of resilience in mental health, and every human has a certain kind of resilience factor, and some of it's genetic, but some of it's environment. They do these resilience studies in identical twins, and we know this phenomenon from, if two people are exposed to the same awful tragedy or trauma, one may actually have no symptoms after a few weeks, and the other may have very severe debilitating symptoms. So there's this concept of, or the push is, can we identify the people who are most likely to be affected by the trauma and get in there and lend support immediately? Like, that's sort of step one, is who are the 25 to 50% of people that are likely to suffer very poor mental health outcomes from this? How do we identify them? And that may or may not be very easy. But then if you are one of the people with less resilience for whatever specific event just happened, those are the people to get regular support, regular check-ins and support available. Then the logic and idea is that this is going to prevent future morbidity. I can't completely point to any research or study that has matter of fact proven this issue, but the goal is to identify those people who need it, have sort of a line available for them, and see what they reach out for and request. And is that meeting with someone frequently and doing a trauma-focused therapy approach? Is it just knowing that there's someone there to help with food or house insecurity, or meeting the patient where they're at with their biggest fears and concerns in the moment? That's hopefully the best way to prevent future trauma-related morbidity.
Yeah, so I think that gets a lot at the next question about, how can mental health professionals or community leaders work together and create some form of a support system for those people who, experienced this traumatic event. Maybe in some cases, how do we make it as available as possible to have resources for people who may struggle later on, but maybe don't realize that they will, or people who are struggling now? How do we set these? Do we do that? Are there systems that exist, and how do we? How do we solve that? I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and you just That just reminded me of another recent study and great topic for a future podcast we should discuss. But yeah, this is the problem with our, in general, broken mental health care system, Parker, is that, there's a lot of attention and interest and in helping the current displaced families and people in LA. But we definitely know PTSD, it could develop 6 months from now. And how do we possibly make sure that people who begin experiencing trauma or having mental health effects months from now get services or help that they need? And then we're getting back to this crisis where, well, if you've even if you have good insurance, it's a battle to even find someone to get into treatment. Finding people with any type of training in trauma-focused CBT or how you work with trauma victims can also be a challenge. And so it's a very difficult, lots of attention goes on this item now, but I doubt there's going to be some sort of fund with cash set up available for mental health support for people who need it in the future. California did used to have this program called Victim Witness, where if you were dealt with trauma, the state would pay for you to get therapy services, and it would pay a reasonable amount. And it was a great program. I'm pretty sure it ended maybe even a decade ago. But we used to have some patients that we could see who didn't have insurance of any type through this Victim Witness program. So like in a perfect world, some money would go into a fund for 2025 LA fire victims, and anyone who needed it would get access to 20 free therapy sessions with someone with skill in that area. And then there would need to be sort of the campaign to, hey, all mental health clinicians who could lend support, can you put your name on a list and tell us how many patients you could take, right? So with an organized effort, you could rally clinicians in the area. Hey, can you give a couple hours? Let's put some of this money into a fund to reimburse something reasonable for that time and have this available for everyone who's developing these symptoms. But it's a massive undertaking, logistics wise. Anything that costs money, coordinating these care, but that would be an ideal outcome.
Yeah, I suppose that makes me wonder whether it's going to be in the interest of, the policymakers to, help these communities kind of build these types of programs or provide resources to build these types of programs, and the scope of what these programs are able to cover. We tend to be a bit more reactive than proactive when it comes to these things. So, we know that it would be great to have some kind of proactive program to, help build some community resilience and, protect our mental well-being in the face of, any kind of future tragic event. But my cynicism here is a little prominent, I guess. I don't know. What's your feeling on that? Whether there will be, I guess, an inclination towards doing something about this. I mean, you mentioned I forget the name of it, but the program that you just mentioned that ended over a decade ago. Might we see any kind of revival of that? Would that be in the interest of everybody? I suppose I'm wondering who it's not in the best interest of, and that's whoever has the money.
Yeah, and right. And if California, to its credit, devotes a lot of budget and money and finances to mental health services, but as far as efficiently and quickly allocating some of those funds for support of victims and avoiding bureaucratic and other nightmares that is the reason why so many people in our field don't work with insurance of any or with state government programs like that. That is the real challenge. And, in my mind, it goes to, I made the landing page, but I haven't set up sort of the California Mental Health Professionals group where I wanted to try to build it. If I had been more proactive and we had, 15,000 California mental health professionals, in a group, you could see where, people want to help, and you could see where, hey, we are looking for people to volunteer an hour a week for the next year for fire victims. How many people can we get? I feel like we could do it with technology and streamlining. So here's our people's availability. We could put it online. We can have a process. We know from zip codes, people who could be affected from the fire, and we could, make an easy sort of sign up. And, even there are people I'm sure who would donate that time for no cost and do it pro bono. But I feel confident if we had that network, we could do something successfully. As far as like once you start trying to bring in other sources or, more players, or can we coordinate, then it becomes so impossible in this mental health system, I feel, to get things done. And yeah, that's our public health crisis, and what I'm hopeful more technology can work to fix some of these issues, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. I mean that sounds great, and I think that's. I mean, let's get the group together. Let's start. What better place to start than now? So yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot so far. I guess, do you have any kind of closing thoughts? Closing thoughts on this topic before we wrap up?
Yeah, there's more to come. I think there's, especially here in California, the fire risk is higher and higher every year.
Right.
Up in Northern California, we were spared last year of any huge fires, but there have been devastating fires, and we know that this is going to continue. So, yeah, can we be a little proactive about getting something in place? I think we kind of do okay on some of the immediate, where are people going to sleep? How are we going to deal with some of the immediate needs? And in the immediate aftermath, can we get something in place to help people suffering from the mental health consequences, so that for the next disaster, there's a clean process to do that? And does that mean we get, do we need to go through the California legislature to get, things? There are things that can be done that take a lot of time. Who can you get to champion some of them? Is the most successful path to, the only thing you can have total control over is building a network on your own and having that piece available and bypassing others. So,
right.
Yeah, it'd be great to see some system get in place and something more proactive, knowing where we're at with the future of, another fire is coming soon. So can we be ready for it to help people?
Right. And it's, we're talking about one specific aspect of the aftermath of this, which is the mental health of the community and the people affected aspect. But yeah, it's still ongoing, and we hope that it ends sooner rather than later. And I think we're still assessing the damage to the communities, to people's homes, and I hope to see the communities build back what they've lost, and also, I was reading about there's kind of like art, like design architecture buildings that were kind of considered like prolific that, we have been lost as well. So, there's a number of different, it's going to affect a lot of people in a number of different ways, some of which we may never be aware of. I just kind of hope to see a brighter future. 'Cause we as humans have a tendency to, come back stronger than ever, but it's going to take some time. And for right now, this is, just a terrible thing to be going on right now. And we hope it ends soon. Well, I think given the topical nature of this episode, we can go ahead and skip the mental health business moment for the week. So let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Just some closing thoughts, or just closing remarks. What are the laundry items? What do we call these? Just thank you for joining this week's episode of the podcast, brought to you by RipsyTech. If you have any questions, send them to our audience Q&A, and if you're interested in applying to be a guest on our show, send us an email, sitandstay@ripsytech.com. All right, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks,
See you later. Bye.
See you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast. Until we meet again, we invite you to sit and stay with the ideas and stories shared today. Dive deeper into how RipsyTech can support your practice by visiting us at RipsyTech.com.